Congratulations, you are reaching the final part of the shoe drawing project. This is where we're applying the pen and ink to your shoe drawing. So we're thinking about the material of pen and ink, the concept of line weight, creating different textures, and creating value using the pen and ink. So the lesson objectives are to use pen and ink to create visual textures such as hatching, cross-hatching, or stippling, and values of darkness to your specific contour shoe drawing. You're changing the line weight of the lines in order to create a sense of form, 3D, for the shoes, and we just practiced that. To identify the edges and surface ridges of the shoes using line weight and textures, and to demonstrate excellent craftsmanship skills by keeping the white drawing paper clean with no ink smudges, no rips or folds in the paper, and no stray pencil or pen marks. So the textures required for your shoes might be different than someone else's. So you will actually have access to the student examples. And there are, again, lots of examples you can look at to see how other students had dealt with different textures of their shoes. And you can see how other students have used cross-hatching, stippling to create the different areas of value. This is what makes your drawing look much more interesting. So avoid doing this. This was my example shoe drawing project from several years ago. All I did was I outlined it using pen and ink. I also used pen to create the stitching for the shoe, but you need to actually add some value and texture. Here, I started doing it here to create some of the form for the interior of the shoe. So after you've completed the graphite transfer of your contour shoe drawing project, so in my example here, I have completed the graphite transfer process. You can see the colored pencil that's over the lines, and you can see the graphite on the back. So I have my drawing now transferred onto the final white paper. Now, if you remove your paper and you realize you have some random smudges on your paper, you can remove that using a kneaded eraser. That's actually a really good idea. You can just actually rub the eraser on the paper. If your lines are really dark, you should actually take a kneaded eraser and lighten them, because again, this isn't a coloring book. We don't want it to be super, super dark, because we do not want the pencil to show up in your final work. We want the pencil to be gone. The pencil is just there to guide us on where to begin with the pen and ink. At the same time, if you're looking at your drawing and you realize something didn't get transferred properly or something disappeared, you can take your pencil and carefully sketch in whatever is missing, though I would not draw super dark. Now, keep in mind, at this stage, do not throw out your contour drawing on newsprint. Save that drawing. Now your next step is adding the pen and ink. So we have a couple things we can use. We do have a ballpoint pen. This is just a regular ballpoint pen. It creates a certain type of mark. You can actually try out the ballpoint pen on some scrap paper. We also have the gel pens. These are great for just starting out, but be aware that this can smudge your paper, so you have to work smart and neatly with the gel pen. And we also have the Pigma Micron pens. These have very finite tips. Again, you do want to be careful with these though. You don't want to push hard with the pressure, because that can push the tip of the pen into the barrel, which is not good. And remember, we practiced different ways to create texture and value, so it is kind of up to you to decide where you're using these techniques. When you're working on the pen and ink, you should actually refer to the actual shoes for your details. So for example, here I actually have my shoes set up there because, to be frank, I didn't draw every single thing. I didn't put the stitching. The sides of the shoe are actually missing some details that I'm going to draw in later using the pen and ink. And as you're drawing, as you're using the pen and ink, it's a good idea to clean up your white paper periodically. We don't want any smudges here. But my first step is actually just going to draw over all of my lines very carefully with the pen, because I want to establish where those edges are. Now, as you can see, I've been outlining my original contour drawing on the white paper. And the thing about using the pen and ink is where you put pen, it's not going to go away. It's going to stay there. So you have to be very deliberate when you are drawing over your lines. If you use searching lines or you're not really paying attention and you put a line in the wrong spot, it's there. You can't get rid of it. Now, if you make a big major boo-boo, you can potentially restart by getting a new piece of white paper and retransferring your contour drawing. That is the beauty of using the graphite transfer process. So as you can see, I have finished transferring this one shoe. So as you can see, I have finished going over the lines just for this one shoe. And so definitely before I do anything else, I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, or you can use your soap eraser, and just carefully, gently go over the lines. You definitely don't want to go super hard because you don't want to accidentally smudge your pen and ink. If you smudge the pen and ink, that's not good. You're going to have a lot of problems later on in terms of craftsmanship. Now, how do you do the stitching for the shoe? Because again, you probably didn't draw it. I didn't draw the stitching, but how you can now add the stitching at this stage is just by actually drawing a line and turning it into an implied line. So I'm looking at the actual shoe in front of me, and there's this little curve here because it's curving with the form, but then there's another line here because this part of the shoe here has two sets of stitching, right? So I drew this line. Now I'm going to take my pen and I'm actually going to go ahead and draw the implied line. Now I'm not going to go totally crazy and try to count how many stitches there are. I just want to create the implied line, and again, it's based off of what I can see in front of me. So I have my stitching completed there. I'm going to let the ink dry, and then I'm going to go over it with my eraser to erase the pencil mark that doesn't have to be there. Again, if we look at the actual setup of my shoes, it's definitely darker on the inside here and underneath the laces as well. I'm not paying attention to the color of the shoe or even the scuff marks here on the sides of the rubber part of the shoe, the sole and whatnot. I'm just thinking about the areas of value on my actual work. So when I'm actually ready to use the pen and ink, I can think about what's the inside and the outside. So this is actually made of fabric, but I'm going to go ahead and just use hatching. So based off of what I see, I'm going to just go ahead and draw a lot of lines. And this is when you really just have to have some faith in yourself, faith in what you're doing, because again, we know that once you add that pen and ink, it is not coming off. You cannot just remove it. Of course, you can always test out your plan, your idea for the different areas of value. So I'm going to do a lot of hatching marks for this part of the shoe. And again, I want to make sure I'm going right to the edge of that shape. And I'm actually going to add some cross hatching down here because I want to show that it's darker. Now, I'm not going to leave this area white because it's not shiny. And yes, there's a little bit of light in the shoe, but I want to show that it's the inside of the shoe. It is not the same as the outside of the shoe. So that's why I'm going to add a little bit more hatching here. And I'm definitely going to layer it much more darker here because that's the more interior of the shoe. Again, you have a lot of choices when you actually get to creating the textures for your shoe. I have a bit of a shadow right here where the shoelace is. So again, I can take my pen and I'm going to actually add just some hatching here. I really like using hatching and cross hatching the most, I think. And I'm just going to add a little bit here just to show that there is a bit of a shadow underneath. So remember, I do have an example from the past where you can literally see the transitions that I made, how I made those decisions to do the different parts of my shoe as I filled parts of it in. Now for your shoe drawing project, this is how this portion of your project will be assessed. I'm looking to see, are your contour lines pretty similar to what you had on the newsprint? Do we see a change of form due to the use of edges, value, and texture? Did you include the details of your shoe, such as stitching, the texture, the edges of the forms? Are your textures appropriate? Are you using hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, scribbling, or scumbling? And do we see a variety of line qualities and line weights, such as thick and thin, dashed and hatched? I have not used any thick and thin lines yet, but I will get to that eventually. Did we use several techniques to create areas of value? You want to make sure the interior of your shoe is not completely black. That's why I was using hatching in my example. We want the shoes to visually pop on the paper, And what about your ink pens? Were they handled with care and dexterity, right? We're not just using random zigzaggy marks.